We are now more than 2 weeks into the 2025 fantasy baseball season, which means that's more than enough time to have conclusive proof on who's good, who's bad. No, I don't think it is, but we're still going to give you 20 pickup recommendations this week anyway, here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Vivid Seats. Erik Halterman here with Ryan Boyer for another Waiver Wire episode. And Ryan, I think it is still probably the most difficult time of year. I said this somewhat last week where, all the pickups just based on, well, this guy made the team, this guy made the rotation, this guy's the closer. Those tend to get used up in the first period or two, and we're still too soon to have most of the stats reach their stabilization points where we can say anything with real confidence. Yet we do still have to pick up players like, Kyron Paris before everybody else does after they hit 3 more homers the next day. So tough time of year. How do you approach things in mid-April?
Yeah, with this limited amount of information available, it's, as you mentioned, very, very difficult evaluation time of the year. I think you have to dig deep on the expected stats kind of stuff to see if that's their starts are sustainable. Your guys that you spend a higher draft pick on, way too early to give up on them. It's April 12th. You always want to get off to a great start, especially if you're playing like in an NFBC league where there's an overall prize, because you really can't afford to fall back too far in those leagues. It's really difficult to make up ground. But I think for the most part, you still should be mostly sticking to your pre-draft evaluations. In general, there are exceptions. If a guy's velocity is down, a pitcher's velocity is down, things like that. Injuries, of course, play a big part. But it's too early to make any sweeping generalizations, other than with the torpedo bats, of course.
Right. Yes, certainly. Yeah, it's been about a week since anybody's mentioned those. Maybe we're done talking about them. Maybe they'll come back with a vengeance over the summer when everybody's got them and figured out how to use them. We'll see. We will get to the names soon, but first we've got a bunch of headlines to talk about, and as usual, that means a bunch of injuries, some of which might open up potential pickups, including with CJ Abrams, who was just placed on the IL a few minutes ago with a right hip flexor strain. CJ Abrams actually missed some time earlier this week, then returned for a few games, but then aggravated the issue Friday in the third inning, had to leave the game. Did he have to leave the game? I'm not actually sure, but he did hit the IL today. Yes, he was removed early yesterday. Hip flexor strain, not the longest of injuries, certainly. I would imagine nothing yet suggests we need to drop CJ Abrams, probably, but you picking up anybody like, for example, Paul DeJong, who's been suggested here by Dave Funnel?
Yeah, I mean, Dave mentions that he's got 3 games at Coors in the upcoming week. That makes him somewhat interesting. I think I would be more interested probably in Jose Tena. I assume he's going to be getting the bulk of the reps at third now, while DeJong slides over to shortstop. They also brought up Nasim Nunez. He's got a good glove. He could get some reps at shortstop as well. Yeah, hopefully it's not one of those things where Abrams needs to get evaluated further, and oh, by the way, he's got a tear in his hip labrum or something, and that's a multi-month absence kind of thing. I think that's what Luis Robert had a labrum tear in his hip a couple of years ago, right? One of his long-term injuries. But as of now, looks like hopefully a short-term thing. You hope that's not going to impact his speed and his aggressiveness on the bases when he does come back. But yeah, I would, with the information we have now, certainly hang on to CJ Abrams. Paul DeJong and Jose Tena, both interesting in deeper leagues. I don't know that I would have much interest in your 12-team leagues. Maybe as a streamer for this particular week, as Dave mentions, that there's 3 games at Coors Field, so that makes it a little more interesting.
Yeah, I think I can get behind that. I think Coors Field does put DeYoung just over the line. Not a very useful player, but certainly somebody that I was already looking at in very deep leagues, like an NL only or like an 18-team mix, something like that. DeYoung is not far from consideration in those 15 teamers already. So some more opportunities for those guys. There'll also be some more opportunities in the infield in St. Louis, which yesterday the opportunity went to Pedro Pages. Mason Wynn had to leave the game with back spasms Friday, and because the team's third middle infield option, Brendan Donovan, was in at DH, they didn't want to lose the DH, make the pitcher bat by putting Donovan at second base. So instead, when Thomas Saggese slid over to shortstop, it was Pedro Pages moving out from behind the plate to play second base, and that got Yoel Potso into the game, and he had the game-winning RBI. So all according to plan for the Cardinals there, I guess. But Mason Wynn has actually hit the IL with lower back spasms. It's apparently more than just a very minor back issue. So is it time to pick up Saggese? Is it time to pick up Nolan Gorman, who returned from a brief absence due to a hamstring injury in the corresponding move? How are you playing this one?
Yeah, Cardinals kind of did this to themselves. They decided not to carry a true backup shortstop. They had one now with Saggese. The opening day roster, they didn't have a backup shortstop. But as you mentioned, with Donovan being used in the DH spot, they kind of hamstrung themselves. But I mean, I think Saggese's probably got to get the bulk of the reps at shortstop now. He's not really a shortstop, but that's where he played most of the time last year at Memphis, and he's at least capable there, and certainly has an interesting bat. So I think in deep leagues, I would be more interested in adding him than DeYoung or Tana. I do think he's super aggressive, hyper aggressive at the plate, but manages to barrel the ball quite a bit. Got good amount of power, a little bit of speed. But really, the big storyline here is if you picked up Pedro Pages as your catcher fill-in for Ivan Herrera or someone else, you might be picking up some second base eligibility if your league platform is very lax with their eligibility requirements.
Yeah, got to play in one where you just need one inning or something. Remember when Anthony Rizzo was a second baseman for a little bit? That was
Yeah,
fun.
because of the shift stuff, they
Right.
included. He had 0 starts at second base, of course, but I think he wound up with like 10 or 12 appearances there
Right, just
officially. So
covering bunts on a shift, something weird. I like the weird baseball bits. I wouldn't mind a little bit more of that. But moving back to some of these injuries, we had Jake Cronenworth hit the IL with a non-displaced right rib fracture, which happened after he got hit by a pitch actually back last weekend. The next man up at second base in San Diego looks like it'll be Jose Iglesias, who actually had quite a bit of success last year. Is Jose Iglesias worth a look ahead of Thomas Saggese and Paul DeYoung and Jose Tena, or not quite?
I think he's right there in that mix. I mean, it's kind of a weird injury with Cronenworth. Like on the surface, you figure it's probably something that's going to keep him out for a while, but it doesn't seem like they're incredibly worried about that. I guess the fact that he played, what was it, 2 games after suffering the injury, kind of gives you an idea that it's something that more pain tolerance than anything else, not something that's going to get worse as if he plays through it. Um, I would probably put him behind Saggese, but it's not. I mean, you could talk me into one or the other. That's a pretty tightly packed group with those 4, I think, and they're all more deep league options. I think I'd probably go Saggese, Iglesias, Tana, DeYoung in that order.
Fair enough. Just real quick, we had a question in the chat about Brooks Lee versus these guys. Brooks Lee, a infielder for the Twins, who's missed the start of the year dealing with back issues, but his rehab has been at AAA for the last few days. Seems like he could be activated pretty soon. Problem is, I don't know if he's going to play regularly, so I would have him probably behind those guys unless I don't know, does he get to start at second base? Willie Castro at third or something? Would you see enough playing time to make him interesting?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would probably put him at the front of that group.
Okay.
Yeah, the Twins have kind of a weird mix in their infield, but with Royce Lewis still, you figure multiple weeks away from a return. I think there's definitely room for Brooks Lee to get regular reps, and they would prefer to have Willie Castro, I think, bounce around to multiple positions anyway. So I don't think he's necessarily blocking Brooks Lee from getting regular playing time. I'm not completely sold on the offensive profile with Brooks Lee, and he
Right.
has had multiple back issues. Should also mention that Mason Wynn also had some back issues last year as well. They were not very serious, but that's something to keep in mind moving forward. You never like to see a younger player with multiple issues with his back. But getting back to Brooks Lee, not completely sold on the offensive profile, but I think there's enough upside there that I would probably put him at the front of that group.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess I'm not at all sold on the offense yet either, but if we're comparing him to Paul DeJong and Jose Iglesias, I don't have to be that sold, so I can see the case. One more injury to talk about here, not an infielder, but a catcher. Joey Bart is out with a back issue. Day to day, though, just for now. I was just double checking in case he's maybe been placed on the IL since we started putting this outline together. I don't believe that's been the case, but the Pirates did call up Henry Davis, and
Right.
I don't think we've seen the corresponding move yet. If you are listening to this in 10 minutes, well, that's probably impossible, but this is the sort of situation that might have some more news coming. But with Joey Bart dealing with a back issue, if he does indeed hit the IL, does that mean Endy Rodriguez gets more interesting in one catcher leagues? He's already owned in a lot of those deep two catcher leagues. Does it mean Henry Davis is worth a pickup? How would you read this one?
Yeah, I mean, Endy Rodriguez was already pretty much playing every day between first base and the days off behind the plate for Joey Bart. So I don't think much changes with him. I mean, if anything else, he's going to have a little more wear and tear, I guess, that he's going to be behind the plate more. But his bat is interesting, but he hasn't really done much so far. I still think he's a viable option in two catcher deeper leagues. I don't think Henry Davis is probably going to get much run. I would guess he would be easily number 2 on the depth chart at catcher, and they're already having to stick Brian Reynolds at DH because he can't play the field right now because of a triceps issue. So that kind of clogs that position, and also means they have to use Andrew McCutchen in the outfield more, and they're kind of looking to get Alexander Canario at bats every now and then. So I don't know if there's options at DH or the outfield for Henry Davis. So I would keep him on the waiver wire for sure. Not sure a whole lot changes for Endy Rodriguez, although if this winds up being a long-term absence for Bart, something that keeps him out beyond when Spencer Horwitz comes back, I guess that enhances his playing time outlook with Endy Rodriguez. You're on mute, Erik.
Maybe some opportunities there, but nothing too exciting to jump on right away for Henry Davis or Endy Rodriguez, probably there. One more bit of news I want to talk about here. Andrew Painter just made his first rehab appearance. Nothing too remarkable, pitching for Low A Clearwater. Only threw an inning and a third, did strike out 3 batters, but allowed 2 runs on 2 hits. But I don't think we're very concerned about the box score there for Andrew Painter. It's just the fact that he is getting back into game action for the first time in a long time. But Andrew Painter, when healthy, was the top pitching prospect in baseball, the kind of guy that gets Justin Verlander comparisons. I mean, they were getting out of hand, it seemed like, for a guy who wasn't even 20 yet. But if you remember, ahead of the 2023 season, before Andrew Painter's 20th birthday, it looked pretty likely that he had a real shot to break camp in the majors. Unfortunately, missed that entire season with elbow issues, which required Tommy John surgery. He didn't get the surgery right away, which meant that he ended up missing 2 full calendar years without even getting back into a minor league rehab appearance. So it's been a very long process here for Painter. He did pitch in the fall league last year, to be fair. He's just had a very slow ramp up this spring. Seems like targeting maybe not even until July. I guess you could maybe see him get in there by June. I mean, that mid-June is still 2 months away, so he'd have time to ramp up if the Phillies want to go that route. So for a prospect who's this good, but whose debut is still, we know, probably 2 months, is now the time because, he's pitching again and people are going to start paying attention. If you don't grab him now, it's going to be too late. Or is this too long to wait on Andrew Painter in leagues where you can pick up guys who are still in the minors?
As tempting as it would be, I think it's just too far away in your kind of standard sized leagues. He's just now ramping back up, and as you mentioned, I don't think the Phillies are going to accelerate that timetable based on need, if there is a need, earlier than June, July. And even when he does presumably join the Phillies rotation later this season, I don't know if we can count on him going very deep into games. It's kind of like a bit of a Dodgers pitching situation where the Phillies are really reserving him for late in the year and potentially the postseason. I think having him being able to go full bore then. I'm not counting on a ton of redraft value from Painter this season. As we get a little closer to his potential season debut, sure, I would be down for stashing him, but I think it's probably too soon in most leagues. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And that's because I really like my bench being full of pitchers that I might want to use next week. I mean, any spot that I'm using to stash is a spot that I'm wasting
Yeah.
for some time and consciously wasting. And Painter could definitely be worth it. But, what's even going to be his path to the rotation right now? It has to be an injury happening because, I mean, maybe I guess they could move Ranger Suarez back to the bullpen, but he didn't look like he deserved to be in the bullpen last year when he was healthy. So there's even some chance that Andrew Painter's healthy and ready to go, and he still waits another few weeks because the Phillies can't figure out how to get him in. So I think that you're going to be stuck waiting a long time. I think in some leagues with where bench spots are easy to waste on players like this, he's probably already picked up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't really want to stash a guy for more than like a month or so. And so I think this is still too long for Andrew Painter, but wanted to mention him now that he's back in the news. We are going to move on to our priority ads, where I have just adjusted the order of the players on our rundown because the first pair of pitchers, I think we have to talk about the guy that I put down first. A couple teammates here, which I might be spoiling who Ryan's first guy is, but David Festa. He made his season debut for the Twins yesterday. David Festa and Zebby Matthews, who you may or may not be about to hear about in a minute, look like some of the Twins' 5 best starters. I'd say they would both, according to the projections, be the fourth or fifth starter in some order, ahead of Simeon Woods Richardson and Chris Paddock. But was it seniority? Was it, service time? For whatever reason, Paddock and Woods Richardson got the first opportunities. But with Pablo Lopez hitting the IL with a hamstring injury earlier this week, Festa was the one who got the first call. I'll let you describe what's going on with Zebby Matthews in a minute, but David Festa himself was pretty good last year if you look at the underlying numbers, and he wasn't very good if you look at some of the surface numbers. A 4.90 ERA, a 132 whip in 14 appearances, 13 of them starts, but both XFIP and Sierra had him all the way down at 358. He struck out 28% of opposing batters while walking just 8%. That is the sort of performance that should work. If you strike out nearly 30% of batters and combine that with a league average walk rate, that's very good. In Festa's first start yesterday, didn't do anything too special against the Tigers. The main problem is he only went 4 2/3 innings. They only let him throw 64 pitches, but one unearned run on 3 hits and a walk while striking out 4. That's good enough to me. I think Festa is a pretty good pitcher. I think he's, at least a solid number 4 starter type already. And given the strikeout stuff he showed last year, there's some upside here. I think the Twins are better than their record suggests, and it's a very easy division. I think there is definitely a path for Festa to never head back to the minors. I think if he just outpitches either Paddock or Woods Richardson, I think he's probably here to stay, which means I think you can throw a pretty good bid on him. I think you can go over 10%. Am I crazy? I mean, there's of course a chance that he makes 2 starts and then loses his spot to Lopez and we're waiting again, but I'd be going in the 12 to 14% range in 12 team leagues for David Festa.
Yeah, I think it would probably take that much to get him. Everybody's always looking for pitching upside on that waiver wire, particularly strikeout upside, and Vesta certainly has that. I realized that he got the first shot, I think probably based more on their schedules than anything else, but I prefer Zebby Matthews, my first recommendation. Look at his, I mean, Zebby Matthews was already interesting prior to spring training, and then he showed up to spring training throwing even harder. Between spring training and AAA, in his first 19 and a third innings, he's got a 0.92 ERA, 25 to 2 strikeout to walk rate. It's been averaging 97.1 miles per hour this four-seamer at AAA. That's up from 94.9 miles per hour last year with the Twins. So pretty significant velocity bump there. The slider, the cutter, also up 2 to 3 miles per hour. And the added velocity has not affected his control. He's been elite in that regard the last 2 years in the minors. He's got a 127 to 8 strikeout to walk rate over 107 innings. We don't know for sure when or even if necessarily we're going to see Zebby Matthews in the majors. It's looking like probably Monday he's going to come up. They pushed their regular rotation members back to accommodate David Festa yesterday. So Pablo Lopez's first spot technically opens up on Monday, and Zebby Matthews could slide right into that role. I just think I'm anticipating him looking so good that he's going to stick around, and Chris Paddock has just looked bad. Woods Richardson has not looked as bad, but I think the upside with him is pretty clearly quite a bit lower. I like Matthews and Festa both quite a bit. If the Twins are going to make a run to the division, I think they need to put them both in the rotation now, probably. I give Matthews the edge just because I think that velocity bump makes his profile more of a 3 or a 4 to potentially borderline ace if he can maintain that velocity bump while still showing that awesome control. So I think the upside with Zebby Matthews is huge. I would be making him a priority, and I think it's going to take, if the information comes out that he's definitely starting Monday, I think it's probably going to take even more than David Festa. I would guess 15-ish%, and I think I would be willing to pay that rate.
Yeah, it's tough with both of them because, again, with both of them, they might decide that there's only one spot available and that, you pick the wrong guy. They might decide there's no spots available. It might just be that a spot start and Pablo Lopez comes back soon, and for whatever reason, Chris Paddock and Woods Richardson stick around. So there's downside, but I think these are two of the more high upside starters who have a clear path, if all goes well, to stick around for 5.5 months. So I think it makes sense to throw real bids at them. The next guy here is somebody who I've seen mentioned in the chat once already. Landen Roupp. Landen Roupp. The question here, Roupp or Hicks? I think I go Jordan Hicks, who I believe we talked about in the past. But Landen Roupp, somebody who mostly was talked about in spring as an obstacle to Hayden Birdsong. I think that's more or less how he was framed. People were mad at him for being in the way. And all right, Birdsong was more exciting. I think he had more flashy fantasy numbers, potentially a higher potential strikeout rate. But Landen Roupp was excellent this spring, a 30% strikeout rate against a 2% walk rate across his 4 starts. And he's been good through his first 2 starts in the regular season. The whip of 150 is a little high, but a 3.60 ERA. He's got a 28% strikeout rate. Again, the walk rate of 9%, you can see how that's leading to a slightly elevated whip, but it's not a major problem by any means. And so if Landen Roupp really is pitching well enough that he's going to stick in the rotation for more than just a start or two. I think the real fear was, all right, he won the job, but he blows up in his second start, and then they give it to Hayden Birdsong. Doesn't seem like that's going to be what happens. So if Landen Roupp is here to stay, and he's got some strikeout upside, and he pitches in a great park, I think Landen Roupp is pretty good. Now, the question here is, would you trust him at the Yankees? That I don't know. That is tougher. So if you're, is he pitching against the Yankees though? I don't think he's going to. We've got Jordan Hicks actually and Logan Webb, but what we do have is a potential 2-start week for Roupp at Philly and then at the Angels. I don't think I'd use him at Philly in isolation, but as part of a 2-start week, the Phillies haven't had a great lineup lately. I think a 2-start week for Landen Roupp is pretty useful. I mean, he doesn't get his good home park on either of those, and that is one of the reasons I like him, but he's got a firm grip-ish on the rotation spot for now, as long as he's pitching well, and he's pitching well. So I'm a lot more interested in Landen Roupp than I was this time 1 month ago. How about you?
Yeah, Philly's offense getting shut down by my boy Andre Palante last night.
Yeah,
of course,
should
I think
we
they were
throw
on.
him in? Yeah,
I think they're on about 3 hours sleep after that fiasco in Atlanta.
true.
So we'll give the Phillies offense a bit of a pass there. Yeah, a 2-start week, I think Roupp is definitely interesting. He's got a 57.7% whiff rate on his curveball so far. I think he should probably even lean into that even more over his sinker. But he's, much as I like Hayden Birdsong, I know you're still a big fan as well. Roupp is interesting in his own right. And I like another member of the Giants rotation that's not universally rostered. Some guy by the name of Justin Verlander.
Name rings the bell.
You look at the 6.92 ERA and the fact that he's 42 years old, and you think, yep, well, Verlander's toast. We can move on, but he's actually doing some interesting things this year. 94.8 miles per hour on his four-seamer. It's the highest it's been since 2022. He won his third Cy Young that year. Slider velocity also up. He's whiffing bats with a slider at a 41% rate. Changeup, he's not throwing as much, but that's had a absurd 61.5% whiff rate so far. His last start against the Reds, he gave up, I think, 6 runs, maybe 5 earned in like 5 2/3 innings, but he also had 9 strikeouts and 20 whiffs on his 90 pitches. So I think that's a very encouraging start. He's at the aforementioned Phillies for his next start. That's not a great matchup, but I think you could also look at that as another buy low opportunity. If he has a poor outing against the Phillies, and you could buy even lower on him. I don't know if the velocity is going to hold. I don't know if the health is going to hold. He's a 42-year-old, and he had been trending in the wrong direction the last couple of years, but the underlying numbers look really good with Verlander. He also looked pretty good this spring as well. So I think there could be a bit of a renaissance season with him, and I think he should probably be rostered in most leagues. Because those numbers, the surface level numbers, aren't great, I don't think it's going to take a huge bid if he's out there in your league. But if you can get him for 6% of your FAAB, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Is that more or less than you'd go on Roupp? Of course, Verlander's got the name value, but also he had that name value at the start of the season, and he was still out there for you. So would you go higher
Redraft,
on Roupp?
Yeah, redraft, I would go Verlander out of the two.
Okay, fair enough. We shall move on to our priority hitters now. I'm going to quick interject something that was mentioned here in the chat because I thought about including this guy as a priority ad, but with Brent Rooker spending a game in the outfield today, people are, I think, pretty smartly viewing this as meaningful for Nick Kurtz, who is a first base / DH prospect who looks pretty ready to go in the athletic system. Of course, first base seems to be blocked by Tyler Soderstrom, and Brent Rooker has been blocking DH. But once Rooker starts spending time in the outfield, that probably means Kurtz is going to come up. I think, is it time to stash him in leagues where you can stash him? I mean, Kurtz is definitely going to show up in this section in a couple weeks when all the NFBC leagues get their shot at him. But for everyone else who can add players while they're still in the minors, now's the time.
I think so. Yeah, I did think it was interesting that Rooker is playing in right field, which of course is Lawrence Butler's position. I don't. Maybe that doesn't matter at all, but I would think if they were considering making him a full time outfielder, which would be in left field, that they would probably play him there and not right field. So maybe this is just a one off thing, and he's not going to be a full time outfielder anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, Kurtz has just been absurd. He looks certainly major league ready right now. If you can stash him in your league, absolutely go ahead and do that.
All right, let's move on to the first guy that I actually put on the sheet here, and that is Sean Murphy. If you are in a one catcher league and you have one of the worst catchers, I would dump that guy for Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy was bad last year, but he claims that it was an oblique issue that he battled back in spring training, never really got him going at any point in the season. And, maybe that's an excuse, but it's pretty believable. And are we forgetting just how good Sean Murphy was over 5 seasons before that? Definitely one of the 10 best catchers in baseball. Had a OPS as good as 844 just 2 years ago, and he's only 30. And Murphy's injury that he dealt with this year, just a cracked rib, that's not the sort of thing that I think should negatively affect him too much going forward. It's not some sort of muscle tear. So if we have good reason to believe he should be basically himself for the first time in a couple years, and if himself is quite a good player when things are going well, especially now that, we're not too far from Ronald Acuna's eventual return and this Atlanta lineup looking a lot better than it has been so far. What I want to ask you is which of these guys actually would you drop for Sean Murphy in a one catcher league? I don't think any of the guys who are owned at least 90% of the time on Yahoo, Adley Rutschman, Sal Perez, William Contreras, Cal Raleigh, Will Smith, Shea Langolier, I don't think they're on the table. Then there's a handful more over 85%. Wilson Contreras, Logan O'Hoppe, JT Realmuto, and Yainer Diaz. Then we got Austin Wells at 80. He is, I believe, the 11th catcher. So that's right on the borderline. After Austin Wells, for me, he's borderline. And everyone below that, Keibert Ruiz, currently injured Ivan Herrera, Gabriel Moreno, currently injured Tyler Stevenson, Hunter Goodman, Francisco Alvarez about to come back. All those guys are more owned than Sean Murphy. Personally, I'd take Murphy over all of them and even maybe over Austin Wells. What about you?
Yeah, I think you hit that cutoff perfectly. That's what I would do as well. I feel like one of the Alex Anthopoulos, one of the poor trades that he's made, at least viewed as he's going to be remembered for bailing on William Contreras and also Shea Langoliers for. But what that masks is that Sean Murphy's pretty good himself. How much did the injuries play into it? I know in I believe his first year with the Braves, he got off to an awesome start and then wasn't used to the heat in Atlanta, he said, and that affected him in the second half. Production wise, that's carried a lot of what he's done with the Braves that first half of that first season, but underlying numbers for him still look pretty good. I think he's, as you mentioned, fairly borderline in a one catcher league, but a two catcher league, if he's available, absolutely go ahead and pick him up. Let's talk about Zac Veen. Looked like he might make the team out of spring training. Awesome spring in Cactus League play, 9 stolen bases, a couple home runs. Also put up an 1150 OPS at AAA to earn that promotion. He's been plagued by injuries, which has affected his prospect stock. He played only 65 games in 2024, 46 games in 2023. But you look back at 2024 in that abbreviated season, had 21 stolen bases, 11 home runs. Go back to 2022 when he was healthy, 55 stolen bases and 12 home runs. Is he going to start against lefties for the Rockies? He did start against Tyler Alexander, which was kind of a quasi-opener slash spot starter type on Wednesday. Then he batted second for the Rockies on Thursday and lead off on Friday. Unfortunately, he wore the golden sombrero yesterday when Nick Pivetta was striking out everyone. I do think that contact could be an issue for Zac Veen. I don't know if he's going to play against lefties. I mean, he certainly should play against lefties. What do the Rockies have to lose? But Rockies are also going to Rocky. They have a tendency to make the wrong decisions with these things often. But Zac Veen is an injury-prone hitter who has contact issues, but giving the environment and his speed upside, his fantasy upside is pretty high. I think it's going to take a pretty healthy bid if you actually want to land him. Should mention that he was available in lots of leagues this past week, but some others this will be the first time you can bid on him. I think it's going to take a double-digit percentage bid to get him. There was a lot of buzz on him during spring training. I think that's probably still out there. What do you think, 12% or so if you want to land Zac Veen? I'm kind of iffy on it whether he'll ultimately be worth that. But I do think if you are a Zac Veen believer, it's probably going to take that much to get him.
Yeah, I think you said it right. I think there's real downside here. I mean, think about all the Rockies outfielders who fit the same general profile. He's got some power and he's got some speed, but there's some real contact concerns here. I mean, I could be describing Sean Bouchard. I could be describing Jordan Beck. I could be describing Brenton Doyle. It worked for Brenton Doyle because he was a literal gold glove center fielder. Zac Veen, I think, is more of a fine corner guy. They've had a lot of guys like this who did not work out, but the potential, if it does work out, is so high that you do have to put in a real bid to get these guys. He's leading off. I mean, they really are giving him the chance to prove that he deserves it. Moving on to another leadoff man, I'm going to go with Matt Wallner. He is owned in all of your deep leagues, but I'm going to make the case that Wallner really does deserve more widespread ownership. Now, this is a tricky one because, in general, I don't love recommending even strong side platoon guys in too many shallow leagues because you just need playing time in all fantasy formats, shallow or deep alike. And can you really go for the guy who's starting, 3/4 of the time over the guy who's slightly worse, but is starting 100% of the time? It's dicey. The reason why I'm willing to go with Wallner is not only is he so while he is starting against every lefty, he's every righty. If he was starting against lefties, he'd be very exciting. But he has sat against all two lefties the Twins have faced so far, but against righties, he's the leadoff man. A very unusual leadoff man is Matt Wallner, more Kyle Schwarber than Ricky Henderson here, but it's a profile that can work. Wallner, for his career, has a 366 OBP. This year, it's up at 370. He's walking 15% of the time. And crucially for Wallner, he's somebody who nearly always runs an unacceptable strikeout rate for his career. He's at 34%. He was at 36% last year. He's had extended periods where he's up over 40% and gets sent back down. This year, 28% strikeout rate. Now, that's not good. I wouldn't be excited about that for many other players, but Wallner's one of those guys who already had enough about him to kind of make it work with a 35% strikeout rate. This is a guy who has huge barrel rates for his career, 17%. That's a profile I'm very interested in. If he can just get that strikeout rate consistently in the high 20s, suddenly we're talking about a very good player. Now, I should mention on a per pitch level, his contact rate is actually down. So I don't have a huge confidence in the fact that his strikeout rate looks better, but it is really mostly that role. If he's the Twins' leadoff guy against every single righty, and he gets on base a ton, he's going to score a lot of runs, and that power should come around. He only has one homer so far, but he's still hitting the ball very hard. So Matt Wallner, a very strange, very flawed player, but the strengths are quite strong, and the role is pretty encouraging. So I'm in on Matt Wallner, even in those shallower leagues.
I'm going to go to a very different kind of player for my next recommendation. Dylan Moore, the Seattle Mariners, the unfortunate Ryan Bliss injury. Going to be out, they say 4 to 5 months, needs surgery to repair a biceps tendon tear. But that assures the playing time for Dylan Moore moving forward. He didn't start the first 5 games this season against a righty, but he started 5 of 6 since then, including 3 versus right-handed pitchers. Off to a good start at the plate as well, 875 OPS, a couple home runs, a couple stolen bases in his first 12 games. He's always been kind of a super utility guy, but in 441 plate appearances last year, managed 32 stolen bases, and he's got a little bit of power as well. Not a great home environment to take advantage of that power, but draws walks. And when you draw a lot of walks and you run consistently like he does, you can pile up those stolen bases when you're playing every day, which he should pretty much be doing. And the most useful thing about Dylan Moore is that he's eligible virtually everywhere. Yahoo Leagues, he's eligible at literally every position but catcher and pitcher. Other leagues, he's probably not going to be eligible at first base. I think he had like 10 or so games there last season. But he should be eligible on any platform between second base, third base, shortstop, and the outfield, especially in your leagues where you don't have IL spots. That's incredibly useful. Dylan Moore, a very flawed player. He strikes out a bunch. Borderline passive, I think you could describe as his plate discipline, draws walks, but he's also going to get himself in some bad counts by taking pitches he shouldn't be taking. He's going to, I think he hit 201 last year. That's right around his career average as well. So he's going to drag down your batting average, but when he plays, he steals a bunch of bases and he's not a zero in the power department. And that quintuple eligibility is plenty useful, especially if you have leagues with no IL spots. So Dylan Moore, it probably just depends on your league situation, on how healthy the bids are going to be for him. I don't think they're going to be that high, but I would be willing to go 6 to 7% certainly on Dylan Moore. Mute Erik.
That seems reasonable. That's higher than I'd go on Matt Wallner. I realized I forgot to give a number for him. I don't think you need to go that high because I don't know. People haven't changed their opinions as much as they should have on him. But Dylan Moore, certainly with the situation changing, with more playing time opening up, he's somebody, if you look at Moore's career per 600 plate appearances, he averages 19 homers and 37 steals. That's the potential production we're looking at now that he's going to be an everyday guy. So especially if you've got a DH only, if you were the Shohei Ohtani drafter or the Brent Rooker or the Marcelo Ozuna or the Kyle Schwarber, there's a lot of teams out there who are kind of struggling for positional versatility because they got no UT. If you get Dylan Moore, you're probably going to be fine. So I would certainly prioritize him there. My next guy here, Geraldo Perdomo. He's somebody who I have liked in deep leagues for quite some time just because I love the shortstop who just plays every day. It's been J.P. Crawford for me for $1 in a deep mixed, staff keeper league. No, not going to really help you, but he's going to be in the lineup all the time and be fine. That was Geraldo Perdomo for most of his career. And maybe that's all he is still on a talent level, but he does already have a couple homers and a couple steals, so maybe there's a little bit more category juice. He really has not given you enough in either of those categories. His career highs are 6 homers and 16 steals. But, if we're talking to somebody who could get closer to a 10-20 or a 15-15 this year in his age 25 season, that's one reason to like him. Another reason to like him is that suddenly he's making a ton of contact. He's always been a good contact hitter, got down to a 15% strikeout rate last year, but he has a 3.4% strikeout rate through 14 games. That is 2 strikeouts in 14 games. That's ridiculous. If he keeps anything close to that up, if we're talking about a single-digit strikeout rate here for Geraldo Perdomo, then we're talking about somebody who should be right up there with the top players in the league in terms of batting average. Almost doesn't matter what his home run and speed totals are at that point. If we're talking, Luis Arias level average, I wouldn't go there yet. But there's yet another reason to be on Geraldo Perdomo this week, and that's that Ketel Marte is going to be out for quite some time with a left hamstring strain. Not sure exactly, but several weeks it looks like. And Marte had been hitting first or second, but now Perdomo has jumped all the way up from 9th in the order to 2nd, right behind Corbin Carroll. So you get a young player who's always been, viable, but who now is showing multiple different signs of growth in the early going and has a much better lineup spot. I don't think that Perdomo has enough about him that I'm saying this is the breakout, but this is a player who's gone from fine to actually pretty interesting for fantasy purposes in a pretty short span. So I'd be throwing a real bid on Perdomo. Maybe 4 to 5 might be all you need to get it, just because he's never had very exciting numbers in the past. But this is a pretty good time for Perdomo potentially.
Yeah, and still just 25, as you mentioned. He's been a regular for 3 years now, so you don't realize he's still that young. And sometimes these guys that are really good contact hitters, they just take a little longer to develop that power. I don't know that that's going to happen with Perdomo, but it's certainly within the range of outcomes, and particularly those OBP leagues, he's got extra value. Jesus Sanchez going to be my next recommendation. He was a favorite target of mine as a kind of a 4th, 5th fantasy outfielder during draft season. Unfortunately, went down with an oblique injury, began the season on the IL, but began his rehab assignment Thursday, so he should be back fairly soon. Look back at last season. Sanchez has always been a guy who's hit the ball hard, but he took it to another level last year. 51.3% hard hit rate, 92.5 mile per hour exit velocity, and a 12.12% barrel rate. He's always swung and missed quite a bit, but he's actually dropped his strikeout rate every season he's been in the league. It came in down a little over 26% last year, which is still a little high, but that's doable for as hard as he hits the ball. Finished with 18 home runs and 16 steals in 2024. Still just 27 years old. If he can just figure out a way to loft the ball just a little bit more, I mean, he hits the ball so hard that I think there's a 30-homer season, maybe multiple 30-homer seasons in that bat. And you're not going to find that kind of power upside on the waiver wire very often. Maybe he's still under the radar enough that where it's not going to take a huge bid to get him, but I think it probably is going to take high single digits, but 7 or 8% I think is worth it for Jesus Sanchez.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Sanchez has looked like he's on the edge of breaking through to me for several years now, and maybe this is the year, maybe not. Injuries keep getting in the way, but I'd want him on my team if it is. We will get to our deep league pitchers in just a minute, but first, this message from Vivid Seats. Finally, baseball is back. This MLB season, knock it out of the park with Vivid Seats and score great tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every fastball, every home run, and every eye-popping play of your favorite team live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats rewards, you earn rewards with every single purchase. Just buy 10 tickets, then cash in your credit toward your free 11th ticket. Talk about an easy win, and here's a pro reward tip. When buying tickets for your whole group, split the bill and make progress toward your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the dugout to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2025 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. I haven't used Vivid Seats in a whole week. I probably should go buy some tickets, get back to Wrigley Field. Last time I went, it was like 38 degrees and Ben Brown walked the whole world in the first inning. But, next time it'll probably go better for all my fantasy teams. We'll see. But welcome back to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here, moving on to our Deep League ads. Starting with the pitchers. Ryan, who is a pitcher you'll be looking to add in deeper formats this week?
Got Quinn Priester, new Milwaukee Brewer Quinn Priester, and had a successful first start at Coors Field. Tough environment to make your team debut, but Quinn Priester went 5 innings, allowed just 1 run, notched 4 strikeouts. He was a former first-round pick of the Pirates and really didn't look all that interesting for the pedigree of a first-round pick while he was with the Pirates, but Red Sox made some changes with him, and he pitched a lot better for them, especially at AAA. During his time at AAA with the Red Sox, he had a 48-12 strikeout to walk rate over 42 in the 3rd innings. Velocity has been up a bit for Quinn Priester. It's also just a bet on the Milwaukee Brewers pitching development. I place a good amount of trust on them. And the fact that they were willing to give up, which a pretty healthy trade package for Quinn Priester. They gave up, I think, the 33rd overall pick plus an interesting upside bat in the minors. That tells me that they think that they could unlock something with him. Is he going to be guaranteed a long-term rotation spot? Maybe not necessarily, but in your deeper leagues, I'll place some trust in the Brewers pitching development and take a roll of the dice on Quinn Priester.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable enough. A guy's been traded a couple times either means that multiple organizations don't want him, or it means that multiple organizations do. And so you could talk yourself into that second one. Maybe let's see where this goes with Quinn Priester. My next guy here, it basically doesn't matter who he is, but what team he pitches for. Landen Roupp. He's currently at the back of the Dodgers rotation, and I'm pretty consistent on this one. Whoever's in the back of the Dodgers rotation, I want them now, and I'll take the next guy in a couple weeks. And that means we can never throw too much money at them in FAAB because, again, probably not sticking on your team for that long. But all of these guys are at least pretty good. Landen Roupp, I'm pretty sure, would be at least a fifth starter for most teams out there. He was not very good in his spot start on Wednesday. He allowed 5 runs on 4 hits and 4 walks in 2 1/3. He struck out just 2, so that's not good. But assuming he sticks around in the rotation, the next 2 projected starts for Landen Roupp look like they would be this Tuesday home versus the Rockies. That's just about the best possible start you could ask for. And then the following week, it looks like he could get a start at Wrigley Field on a cold April Wednesday. I think those are 2 starts that I would use Landen Roupp for. And, maybe by then, Tony Gonsolin's ready to go. Maybe Blake Snell is healthy again. Maybe somebody else comes through. They're going to constantly churn their pitchers, certainly. But anybody who gets to throw potentially the first 5 innings for the Dodgers has a very good shot at a win. Landen Roupp, while he wasn't great in his last start, his career numbers are still more or less fine, right? He's got a 4.05 ERA, a 116 whip. He's striking out 24% of opposing batters while walking 7%. Landen Roupp's fine. If he was on another team, he would be owned in deep leagues. He wouldn't be used all the time. Maybe he'd just be a streamer, but I think he'd just be somebody who sits on somebody's bench and gets used about half the time. And that would be if he didn't get to pitch for the Dodgers, but he does. So use Landen Roupp now and then use Ben Kasparius in a few weeks and Bobby Miller after that. That's how we roll with the Dodgers, I think. How about you?
Yeah, Roupp, somebody who, if he was in a different, you can look at it 2 ways, I guess. If he was in a different organization, he probably would have been in the rotation a long time ago as a regular member of the rotation. Since he's with the Dodgers, he's pitched some in the bullpen. He's been back at AAA. But yeah, if he can get through 5 innings, that's a recipe for a win most starts. I'm going to stick with the Brewers with my next recommendation and go with a veteran and Jose Quintana. Surprisingly good in his first start against a tough matchup with the Diamondbacks. 7 shutout innings, just 4 hits allowed, only 2 strikeouts, but didn't walk a batter. Had a nice season last year with the Mets, 3.75 ERA, 1.25 WHIP. Really was good down the stretch for them in his final 9 starts between the regular and the postseason. Had a 1.42 ERA. There's 0 upside to speak of here, maybe even in deeper formats. This is strictly a floor play. But, again, I'm going to place some faith in the Brewers pitching development. Well, not much more developing to do with Jose Quintana, but they're going to, I think, get him to throw the pitch mix that he needs to throw. And on a pretty good team, he should provide some offensive support. And he's going to have a spot in the rotation, I think, indefinitely, given all the injuries that they're going through. So strictly a floor play, but one who could provide some solid ratios, Jose Quintana.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be excited to add him, but pretty good chance you're not upset about it either. I would say the opposite about my next guy on the list here, Edward Cabrera, who you prodded me to put on the list because I seem to mention him 5 times a year and every time say that I don't actually like Edward Cabrera, but he is available and he's got some things going for him. I still think Edward Cabrera is going to be a really good closer one day. He's exactly the sort of pitcher who moves to the bullpen and takes off because he can't really throw strikes. He can't really stay healthy. I don't think Edward Cabrera should be a starter. He's never even reached 100 innings in the majors, but he's starting right now for the Marlins, who apparently their park isn't quite as pitcher friendly as the reputation might hold, but it's certainly not a park I'm afraid to pitch in. Actually, yeah, if you look at the numbers, it was more pitcher friendly for an extended period, and then just the last couple years has actually gotten a bit more hitter friendly there. So if it's a neutral-ish park and a pretty bad team, it's not a great place to pitch. The only appeal really for Edward Cabrera is that he gets strikeouts. For his career, it's a 26% strikeout rate. He's been as high as 27.2 a couple years ago. It comes with a 13% walk rate, though, and that's the problem with Edward Cabrera. At no point do I think he's really going to finally figure it all out and become some dominant ace, but in terms of, strikeout minus walk rate, it usually turns out pretty okay because there are enough whiffs there. I think Edward Cabrera, it all adds up to an interesting enough guy for the month or two where he's healthy. So I do think you should get Edward Cabrera, use him in most of his starts, and then cut him as soon as he gets hurt in a few weeks. Are you buying that, or are you letting someone else take Edward Cabrera?
Yeah, we discussed before going on air that I did a little preliminary FAAB work in a few leagues, and I just couldn't bring myself to click on Edward Cabrera's name. Just the thing with him is you can look at the matchups and say, oh, he's got a couple of great matchups this week. Maybe this is a good week to stream Edward Cabrera. But I don't think it really even matters what his matchups are. It's just,
Right.
Is he going to be able to find the plate? Is he going to be able to stand upright for 5 to 6 innings and avoid the blisters and the shoulder issues and everything else he's dealt with? So it's just he's such a headache that I might just not bother with it. But we're talking about deeper leagues here, and he is someone who offers upside. So,
well, would you take him over the guy I cut for him, Carmen Majinski? I mean, this is the kind of guy we're making decisions between, right? Edward Cabrera has shown us something.
Right.
He's also shown us some bad stuff. And then we got a Carmen Majinski, or I don't even remember the guy's first name, Gusto, for the Astros, who's pitching today. Is it Ryan Gusto?
Ryan Gusto, yep.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking guys like that, right? That's why we're considering Edward Cabrera.
And if in that type of situation, I'm fine rolling the dice on him. But I tend to eventually find options that I would prefer over Edward Cabrera. And actually, this next one I'm going to talk about I'm interested to hear your rebuttal as a Phillies fan. Taijuan Walker has not given up a run in his first 2 starts this season. He's also completely changed his pitch mix so far. He's made his cutter his primary pitch in his first 2 starts. That was his 6th most used pitch last year. He certainly needed to change something up given what happened last year, and he's done that and had success. He has a 2-start week next week, and the matchups are not very daunting. He's got the Giants and the Marlins at home. Not an easy environment to pitch in, certainly, but I think if you're pretty desperate for a 2-start streamer, I would consider Taijuan Walker. And yes, I think I would roster him over someone like Edward Cabrera.
Yeah. So the rebuttal here is only going to be that I don't know if you're going to get more than this 1 2-start week, but the way Taijuan Walker has pitched so far, I absolutely would want him in a 2-start week against the Giants and Marlins next week. That's good enough to me. The problem is that he's definitely not one of the Phillies' 5 best starters. He's the 6th starter now. Later in the year, we mentioned Andrew Painter. That'll bump Walker down to 7. That's for June or July, but Ranger Suarez is coming back probably in just a couple weeks. He was never dealing with a particularly severe injury, and he already got up to 3 innings in his rehab start as he works his way back from a back issue. So I don't think that we have more than a couple starts here for Taijuan Walker, but last year he was terrible because he was dealing with some injuries. If he's through those injuries, then we should be back to viewing Taijuan Walker as the guy he was over the 3 or so years before that, which is somebody with an ERA in the low 4s and not enough strikeouts, but somebody who belongs in a major league rotation. So I think he's usable. I just don't think he's going to start for long. You've got
Yeah,
a question here. Yeah.
I
What are
wanted
your
to
thoughts on this
address
one?
this question that John posed. And at the top of the show, we had mentioned a handful of middle infield options that could be available for you. Thomas Sajaci should get, I think, regular run at shortstop. While Mason Wynn is out, he's a guy would consider if he's available. Brooks Lee coming off the IL soon probably is should be maybe available in that league. And digging deeper, Jose Tena and Paul DeYoung are also going to should be playing regularly while CJ Abrams is out. And the Nationals are in Coors for 3 games this week. So hopefully at least one of those guys is available in your league, John, so you can be less devastated in your middle infield.
Yeah, thanks for that question, John. Let's move on to our deep league hitters, where you've got at least one middle infield option in there. We'll get to him in a minute. I'm going to throw out Miguel Andujar, although, given that we talked about Nick Kurtz at the start of the show, it's possible there's only a brief window that Miguel Andujar is a regular for the Athletics. Would imagine he would be the corner outfielder whose spot is at threat when Brent Rooker moves out there. Assuming JJ Bleday and Lance Butler take the other 2 spots. But for now, Miguel Andujar is playing regularly and he's making a lot of contact. And that's enough for me to look his way in deeper leagues, especially when you toss in the fact that that park in Sacramento looks incredibly hitter friendly. Andujar's hitting .310, striking out just 18% of the time. Good for a 126 WRC plus overall, just 1 homer. And it's actually been several years since he's had promising, or 2 years since he's had a promising hard hit rate, but that was over just 30 games. Andujar really has never come close to being the player that he looked like he was going to be when he had that excellent Rookie of the Year season, was it, back in 2018? 27 homers, hit .297. He's fallen far from that ever since, but do remember that he hit .285 last year in 319 plate appearances. Not really enough power or speed, but with a little bit of a boost from a better park, I think you could get a good batting average, some solid counting stats from the everyday role, and then you'll probably have to cut him when Nick Kurtz arrives. But I think we still have a little bit of time here where Miguel Andujar is a pretty useful deep league option.
Yeah, and Andujar had the unfortunate honor to have a good rookie season in the year that Shohei Ohtani guy came to the
right,
state.
yes.
So he was runner up and rookie of the
Yes,
year
that's
voting.
what it was.
I'm going to go to, going back to John's question here, another guy who might be available as a middle infield option, Chase Mydroth of the White Sox. Nice debut after being called up. 3 walks, 1 single, and 2 runs scored, and that's Chase Mydroth in a nutshell right there. 450 OBP, 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases. Is off to that kind of start at AAA this year. A 5-8 strikeout to walk rate at AAA Charlotte. You look last year in the minors, had 105 walks to 71 strikeouts, a 437 OBP. Counting stats, not much to look at. 7 home runs, 13 stolen bases. Could there potentially be a little power breakout? I mean, he kind of falls into that same bucket as a guy like we mentioned earlier, Geraldo Perdomo, that maybe the power is the last thing to come for him. When you make a bunch of contact, maybe you eventually stumble into that power. I don't know if that's going to happen with Chase Mydroth, but especially in OBP leagues, he should be useful. He's also, I think, got the potential to move to the leadoff spot. He's batted 7th yesterday, and I think he's batting 6th today, but just a natural leadoff hitter. And let's face it, the White Sox don't have a lot of great options to bat leadoff. So I think Chase Mydroth could find himself batting leadoff sooner rather than later. And as bad as the White Sox lineup is, if he's hitting leadoff and gets on base at anywhere close to the clip he has the potential to, he should score a decent number of runs.
Yeah, really just outstanding plate discipline numbers in the minors for Mydroth. Last year, 19% walk rate against a 13% strikeout rate. You rarely see anyone with more walks than strikeouts, let alone way more walks than strikeouts. It's always a little bit disconcerting when that's the only skill that really stands out. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of power or speed, but on the other hand, when you have that good plate discipline that young, that looks like the sort of base that you can add some other skills on and become a pretty interesting player. So I want to see where this goes for Chase Mydroth. My next guy up has gotten more interesting since the show began, or since I put him on the rundown. Alex Call. I put him on here because he started getting some playing time unexpectedly in the Washington outfield. Jacob Young already heading to the bench on a regular basis, with Dylan Cruz moving to center and Call starting in right. I think there's a possibility Cruz heads back to the minors at some point if his terrible start continues. But Call preferred to Jacob Young, who really just is a slap hitter who plays good defense and looks like a fourth outfielder. So maybe this shouldn't have came completely out of nowhere. Call this year, it's a ton of contact is what's going right for him. He has a 3% strikeout rate through 32 plate appearances, also a 22% walk rate, so showing incredible plate discipline. He's yet to barrel a ball, isn't really hitting the ball hard, but he also has one steal as well. And he looks like he's going to be the leadoff man, at least while CJ Abrams is on the IL. We talked about that at the start of the show. Maybe not a particularly long absence for Abrams, but Call already was getting some leadoff opportunities against lefties. He's a right-handed bat. And today, with Abrams on the IL, we have a lineup in, and he is the leadoff man against the right-handed Sandy Alcantara. So if Alex Call is the everyday leadoff man temporarily for the Nationals, almost doesn't matter how good he is, and he might be decent. I mean, for his career, we are talking about a 30-year-old who only has 715 plate appearances, but 12% walk rate, 18% strikeout rate shows a good eye for the zone, a good contact ability, just doesn't really hit the ball hard enough. So I don't know if there's a lot here, but I think there should be a lot of playing time and a moderate amount of steals and maybe a decent batting average as well. That's certainly enough for me in a deeper league. So I'd go get Alex Call this weekend.
Yeah, RIP to those who relied on Jacob Young as your only source of steals late in your draft. He's that's what happens when you don't have much to fall back on and you lose your playing time. You're not going to get those stolen bases. My final deep league hitter recommendation, I'm going to go to Matt Mervis. 3 home runs in his first 9 games this season with the Marlins. Remember all the Matt Mervis buzz a couple years ago? He had that monster spring. Everybody was mad the Cubs didn't carry him on their opening day roster. 36 home runs between 3 levels in his breakout year in 2022. Had another 22 home runs over just 441 plate appearances in the minors in 2023. Hits the ball incredibly hard. So far this season, 58.8% hard hit rates, 96.4 miles per hour on his exit velocity, 11.8% barrel rate. Bats clean up regularly against right-handed pitching. Okay, now we need to get to the bad regarding Matt Mervis. 40.6% strikeout rate so far in 2025, 33.
Not what you want.
3.3% in his relatively brief major league career. He also has yet to start a game against left-handed pitching. I am not at all sold that he's going to make enough contact to be a impact major league hitter. I think more likely than not, he's probably going to be your quad A type that just can't stick at the major league level, but he undeniably has lots of power and he's batting cleanup and playing regularly against right-handed pitching. So if you need a little power boost in your deep league, I think Matt Mervis is worth a shot.
Yeah, I would certainly give him a look on some teams, and I'd be willing to cut bait pretty quickly if that strikeout rate remains that high. My last guy on the list, and I'm not sure about this one. I think I might have preferred some of the options we talked about in the headline section, all those middle infielders stepping in for their injured teammates. But
Uncle Ted's going to be happy about this one.
Yes, here we go. Trent Grisham. I will throw out a recommendation for Trent Grisham. The reason I'm not that happy with it, though, is that it looks like he's not in the lineup today. And when I had thrown him on there yesterday, he was starting most of the Yankees games. But if he's not starting today, and he wasn't in the lineup 2 games ago, I am a little bit worried about whether or not there's going to be enough playing time for Trent Grisham, but it looks like there's more than expected. So I do want to see where this goes. If he's back in the lineup tomorrow, for example, then I am somewhat interested. Grisham is suddenly hitting well, which is weird. The thing, though, is Trent Grisham, for several years now, has actually had a pretty good barrel rate. For his career, he's at 9%. In the last 2 years, he was actually at 12%. Problem is, he combined that with too many strikeouts, 28, 29, 27% the last few years. This year, he's hitting the ball as hard as ever, and the strikeout rate is down at 19%. Now it's only 36 plate appearances, but still, this is the one thing that he needed to do. Early in his career, when he was a Padre and playing regularly, he did have about a league average strikeout rate. So maybe with regular playing time, that's something Grisham could still do. I think he could get to close to a league average hitter on a per game basis when he's playing. I just don't know. The issue is Ben Rice, really. There would be playing time if Ben Rice wasn't very good, but if he's blocking the DH spot pretty much every game, then it looks like we'd have to go with, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, and Jason Dominguez every day in the outfield, and there's no spot for Grisham. Grisham weirdly plays against lefties, and Ben Rice doesn't, even though Grisham is himself a lefty. So it's a little bit tricky here that he's going to be on the short side platoon as a left-handed hitter. You don't want that. There's a ton of ways this doesn't work out for Grisham, but he has shown something in this small sample, and if this something gets him more playing time, and if he's playing regularly as a left-handed bat in Yankee Stadium, there's certainly a deep league viable option here. So I definitely want to keep an eye on, does he start tomorrow? I think that's the big question. And if he does, then yeah, I think you can throw some bids on Trent Grisham. You do want to talk about this last guy here, Pavin Smith? Probably more of an option for shallow leagues. This is a question I've had him as a borderline option because he's a strong side platoon guy, Pavin Smith, which is tough to play in shallow leagues, but he's also pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, he did interesting things last year, and he's doing even more interesting things so far this year. His barrel rate so far this season is 27.8%. Hard hit rate 61.1%. He's batting in the middle of the lineup for the Diamondbacks regularly against righties anyway, not playing against lefties. Strikeout rate is way up this season, but he's never been a guy who's struck out that much, so I'm not super concerned about that. Still drawing a bunch of walks. I think Pavin Smith is a good hitter. I would certainly take him over any of the deep league recommendations and probably most of our priority ads as well, if he is still available in your league.
Yeah, I like him. You just got to make sure that they've got enough righties on the schedule, and I believe they have a ton of righties on the schedule this week, so good time to add Pavin Smith. That's everybody we had on our list today. I just want to end with one more quick Kyron Paris question, because just one week ago, we mentioned Kyron Paris. I had him as the final player as the Deep League ads, and I said, yeah, maybe try to slip him in for a buck or two and don't start him this week because he's not playing. That was the thing. This time last week, Kyron Paris, I believe, had started maybe 2 games, and it was only while other players were injured. He was doing things when he came in off the bench, but he wasn't playing yet. Then right after our show ended, the very next day, he homered, and that was homered and stealed, I believe. Stealed, interesting. We probably should end the show while I can still talk. He homered and stole a base, and that was enough to make him get a ton of bids, and then he homered the next day, and then he homered 2 more times the game after that. So Kyron Paris, just in the last week, has gone from somebody who's not really playing at all, but showing a little bit of something, so maybe you want to go get him, to someone who was the talk of the league for the week, who was picked up in every single NFBC main event league, every single Glarf league, but he is still out there in roughly a quarter to a third of online championship leagues, similar numbers for TGFBI, for example. So now that we actually have a week's worth of Kyron Paris as a starter, he's gone in a lot of places. Again, he was the top bid in the main event because they got to see that extra homer that we didn't see at the time of our podcast. But there's some people who still have the opportunity to bid on him. You throwing out 150, 250 bucks? I mean, how are you playing this?
I suspect I'm probably not going to be able to bid if he is still available in your league. I suspect someone's going to be able to outbid him, outbid me for him rather. The strikeout rate is at, let me double check, 18.4% so far this season. I mean, if that sticks, he could be really, really good. But prior to that, struck out well over 30%. And including in the minors, he struck out about a third of his plate appearances. That's just not a sustainable rate. When you consider he struck out that much against minor league pitching, I just don't have a ton of faith that he's going to be able to make enough contact. But he's still really young and has the physical tools. It came out that he's visited with Aaron Judge's personal hitting coach over the offseason, and that's kind of spearheaded a lot of the changes he's made. And maybe he's just figured it out and taken a step forward. That's certainly possible. I would bet against it. I'd probably sell Kyron Paris if someone is fully buying in, but he is young enough that it's certainly a possibility that everything is just clicking into place for him.
Yeah, the thing is, his strikeout rate's down, but you know what's also down is his contact rate and his zone contact rate as well. So that's a little bit weird. That looks small sample fluke. To me, I'm still not buying him as somebody who's going to give me a good batting average because I don't think a swing change is going to turn his strikeout rate from a huge problem to an asset. I do buy it unlocking some more power, and I think we could get some real power and some real speed. But, you know, the projections, the most optimistic one, the Bad X calls for a 221 average. I guess I could be willing to take the over on that, but a 230-ish, 240 would be, I think, a good outcome for Paris. But you should add him. We were too pessimistic on him last week. There's more there than we thought, even if there's not, you know, a future superstar necessarily. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for everybody who hung out in the comments. And we will be back next week on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Vivid Seats.